everyone, it's B. Welcome back to my Women of Survival Horror series where I talk about the women of survival horror. Today I will be talking about Rebecca Chambers from Resident Evil 1, which you're probably already way too familiar with, and Resident Evil 0, a game released by Capcom in 2002 that serves as a prequel to the original Resident Evil. Though Rebecca is in both games and plays a more minor role in several other Resident Evil titles as well, she is the main protagonist of Resident Evil 0, so that's the game I'll be focusing on in this video. Before I can get into the finer details of talking about Rebecca as a character, I first need to give you a little bit of context, and as usual, that might take a little while, so if you'd like to go get yourself a snack or some coffee, now would probably be a good time. Don't worry, I'll wait for you. Luckily, I don't need to give too big of a content warning for this one. Usually when I make these Women of Survival Horror videos, the themes covered in the games that these women are in are exceptionally dark, but Resident Evil 0 isn't too bad by comparison. So I'll just say that the content warnings for this video include general video game violence, which I'm sure you probably expected if you clicked on this video, and PTSD resulting from military service. I won't be including the clip where the depiction of that is actually shown, but there will maybe be some talk of it. And as always, please don't feel the need to sacrifice your mental health for the sake of watching my silly little video, and proceed with caution. Alright, let's get to talking about Resident Evil 0. Resident Evil 0 starts with our protagonist, Rebecca Chambers, a new member of the Special Police Force Unit STARS Bravo team. In case you're unfamiliar, STARS stands for Special Tactics and Rescue Service, who have been sent to investigate a series of horrific murders in the mountainous region just outside of Raccoon City, which will be Rebecca's first actual mission. Within moments of the game beginning, Rebecca finds a report on a man named Billy Coen, a 26-year-old ex-lieutenant who escaped the vehicle transporting him to the facility he was going to be executed at for killing 23 people while in service. After this, Rebecca splits up from her unit and discovers the now abandoned Ecliptic Express, a passenger train owned by Umbrella. You know, the Resident Evil bad guy Umbrella. She enters the train alone and announces herself, asking whoever may be there to identify themselves, and as she walks past the empty train seats, she finds a man clearly dead and having been mauled, and a radio sitting at his feet. As she picks the radio up, the man who is presumed to be dead stands up and begins walking towards her, as do two other presumably dead men. Zombies, obviously. She kills them, and moments later, Billy Coen, who was also aboard the train, happens upon her and holds a gun to her head while her back is turned to him. She stands and acknowledges that she knows who he is.
Lieutenant Coen.
So, you seem to know me. Been fantasizing about me, have you?
Billy is a real jackass. Not in a particularly malicious way, but in the normal calling girls you don't know honey and doll face kind of way. After their little interaction, Billy begins to walk away, and Rebecca runs after him and attempts to arrest him, kinda. He brushes her off and continues walking away, so she just yells, "I could shoot, you know," after him, then turns and awkwardly looks at the ground. It's very clear that she has very little confidence, especially in, arresting people and taking charge. After this, Edward, another member of her unit, comes crashing through one of the train's windows, beaten and bloodied. She runs to his aid, and he tells her to be careful because the forest is filled with zombies and monsters. After some more zombie killing, Rebecca hears over her walkie-talkie that the rest of her unit has discovered that Billy killed as many as 23 people and has been previously institutionalized, so she needs to keep her guard up because he wouldn't think twice about killing her. I'm sure. She encounters Billy again a little later on, and he warns her that it's going to be dangerous from here on in, and asks her to cooperate with him so they'll be safer. She seems obviously disgusted by this, but it is true that the train is clearly too dangerous for them to wander around alone on. Rebecca still isn't going along with it though, and she gives him a piece of her mind.
You expect me to trust you, a wanted felon? I don't need your help. I can handle this on my own. And don't call me little girl.
All right, Miss Do-It-Yourself. What should I call you?
The name is Rebecca Chambers, but that's Officer Chambers to you.
Well then, Rebecca, why don't you go and try while I wait here?
So as you can see, that didn't really work out as he planned. Rebecca goes off on her own once again and comes across an elderly man who at first looks like he may just be asleep, but as she approaches and tries to wake him, his head falls off and hits the floor, and a mass of leeches flow out from his neck and amalgamate into a towering mass, essentially recreating the man that they had come out of, and then break free of their amalgamation and quickly swarm Rebecca. Luckily though, Billy shoots the leeches off and the remaining ones scurry away. He asks her if she's okay, and then they hear the sound of a random guy singing atop a mountain just outside the window. But before they get the chance to really even think about it, the train begins moving and they decide to split up to investigate after begrudgingly agreeing to cooperate with one another. From this point on, the player plays as both Billy and Rebecca. Together they work to stop the train so that it doesn't derail or crash, and depending on who you choose to work the control panel, and who you choose to apply the brake, you'll get two separate interactions, which I think is interesting and tells a lot about both of their characters, so I'll play those for you real quick.
I'll go over to the back deck and manipulate the control panel for the brake. Then you apply the brake from here, okay?
All right. Billy,
What?
be careful.
Yeah.
I'll go over to the back deck and manipulate the control panel for the brake. You stay here and apply the brake when ready.
Okay. Rebecca!
Huh?
Don't screw up, okay?
I won't.
Despite their best efforts, the train crashes and now they're stranded in a tunnel, but manage to find their way into the Umbrella Research Center. Wesker and William Birkin are watching them over security cameras as Rebecca and Billy look at a painting of Dr. James Marcus, the first general manager of Umbrella, the same man who Rebecca watched essentially turn into a pile of goo on the train. As Wesker continues watching the security cameras, they see a new man appear who claims to be the one who scattered the T-virus in both the mansion and in the train as revenge on Umbrella. He starts singing again for whatever reason, and I must say this man looks like a Final Fantasy character or maybe an evil version of Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. Either way, his vibes are very confusing. It also appears that his singing is what controls the leeches and uses said leeches to create Dr. Marcus. He monologues about how Dr. Marcus was murdered by Umbrella 10 years ago and laughs maniacally. Also, this guy doesn't have a name as far as I know, so from now on I'm just going to call him Evil Howl. Back to Billy and Rebecca. After finding a piano, we learn that Billy, uncharacteristically, is a pretty skilled pianist and that Rebecca is not. This doesn't have any bearing on the actual plot, I just think it's kind of cute. The longer Billy and Rebecca work together, the more comfortable they become with one another and the less begrudging their cooperation begins to seem. They check in with each other frequently and unwaveringly have each other's backs. We then see that Evil Howl has gained access to the security cameras and has begun watching Rebecca and Billy as they make their way around the research center and says that they're wasting their time because he's already claimed this place for himself. So therefore, they are trespassing, so of course he sics an evil monkey on them. You know, as you do. Wesker also reveals his plan to lure the STARS members into the Spencer Mansion, which is obviously what happens in the first Resident Evil game, and William Birkin reveals his plan to activate the self-destructive device in the basement and destroy the entire Umbrella research facility. Back to Billy and Rebecca again. After Billy saves Rebecca from falling down a pit that opened up in the floor and pulling her back to safety, she hears from Enrico over her walkie-talkie asking her if she's found Billy yet, which obviously puts her in a bit of a tricky situation. Does she give him up and break the trust they've built, or lie to her unit?
Have you managed to locate Coen yet? Over. Rebecca, answer me.
No, sir. I have not found him yet. I'll continue to search for him. Over.
Rebecca,
My first mission, and I've already disobeyed orders.
She lies and says she hasn't found him yet, and this further cements the trust that Billy and her share, and they have a nice moment together where Rebecca asks him to tell her the truth about whether or not he actually did what he's been accused of doing. Billy talks openly with Rebecca about his traumatic experience seeing combat in Africa this time last year, and how his leader had wrongly ordered them to attack an innocent village, but he quickly shuts up and goes back to his shut-off self after Rebecca asks him if he really did execute those innocent people, but she quickly defends him, saying that she doesn't think he did. And she also doesn't think he was the one that killed those men transporting him to the facility where he was going to be put to death. But he just says that she doesn't get it, and he either has to report to the Marines and serve out his sentence, or keep running as long as he can because no one will believe him anyways, even if she vouches for him. Billy and Rebecca later come to the conclusion that judging by the age of Evil Howl, he could potentially be Dr. Marcus's son or grandson. They find an aerial cable car, which might be a promising way for them to escape the facility, but just as they're about to get on, the evil monkey from earlier attacks them yet again and they become separated once more. Later on, Rebecca meets up with another member of her unit and he tells her to come with him, but she stops him and says, "Wait, I need to find Billy." Which obviously comes as a surprise to this guy because when he asked her earlier if she had seen him, she said no. But he just says that there's no point in worrying about him because he won't make it anyways. Rebecca refuses to leave without Billy though, and goes back out on her own to find him, abandoning her unit. Later on, we cut to Evil Howl maniacally monologuing to himself once again while watching Rebecca on the security cameras. He says that playtime is over because her and her friends no longer amuse him and that nothing will stop him from getting his revenge. Good for you, dude. Who cares? Anywho, Rebecca finds Billy unconscious in a body of water, and he gets washed away by a huge wave, but Rebecca goes after him and they realize that surrounding them are tons of human skeletons who may have belonged to test subjects of Dr. Marcus. Rebecca and Billy eventually happen upon Evil Howl. Billy asks him who he is, and he just says, "This," and then Evil Howl's face changes into that of Dr. Marcus himself. Plot twist. Dr. Marcus tells the story of his own assassination that happened 10 years ago at the request of Spencer, of the Spencer Mansion from Resident Evil 1, which Wesker and Birkin both were witness to. But as he lay dead, the T-virus took over his body and brought him back to life, and now he's back to seek his revenge. But just as he's about to do that, he begins morphing into a grotesque, slimy form, which Rebecca and Billy fight together in an attempt to get on with their escape. But not before the self-destruct system had been activated. Because, it's a Resident Evil game. There always has to be a timed portion, for some reason. They discover that the T-Virus Queen can't handle sunlight, so Rebecca opens the windows while Billy uses his charm to distract Her Majesty. His words, not mine. And they succeed in defeating the Queen. They run from the facility as it explodes, and the next thing we see is the two of them standing atop a mountain. Billy throws his handcuffs and lies on the grass. Rebecca notices off in the distance the Spencer Mansion, a bit of foreshadowing for later. Rebecca then takes Billy's dog tags and puts them on herself, saying, "Officially, Lieutenant Billy Coen is dead," meaning that now she has his dog tags, she can tell everyone that he died in the facility, and he can be free to go about living the rest of his life without having to worry about people trying to track him down. They salute each other and part ways. Rebecca walks away and Billy watches her go, quietly thanking her and giving her a thumbs up the same way that she always does. It's very cute. I always cry when I watch this part. That's the end of Resident Evil 0, but I'd also like to briefly talk about her role in Resident Evil 1. In both games, she acts as a medic for the STARS Bravo team. However, this is much more important to her role in Resident Evil 1 as she spends much of the game treating the wounds of the STARS Alpha team members, whom she meets up with in the Spencer Mansion shortly after where we left off at the end of Resident Evil 0. And with that, we have reached the end of the plot summary portion of this video. So now that you have a better understanding of how Rebecca interacts with others, we can finally get to talking about her as a character. Rebecca is described as having been a child prodigy growing up, finishing grade school early and starting college at a young age, graduating with a bachelor's in chemistry at the age of 18, the age that she is in both Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1. So she is very young, that is exceptionally young to graduate from college. After graduating, Rebecca got herself a job working for STARS in 1998. Based on what we can see in the beginning of Resident Evil 0, it seems like Rebecca is both the youngest member of the Bravo team as well as the only female. Despite this, Rebecca seems very confident in her abilities, maybe not in combat and, asserting her authority over people, but in her abilities as a medic and her knowledge of medicine. She's also part of the Raccoon City Police Department's basketball team. Good for her! I think it's wonderful that Rebecca can hold her own as a young woman in such a male-dominated position in her unit, and I also think it's great that Rebecca's character is written in such a way that she actually takes an active role in the story rather than just being a passive observer that only reacts to the things that happen to them without really ever having a say in the matter, as is the case with many women in survival horror games. I think that both of these attributes set a great example for young girls who might be exposed to this game as a kid the way that I was. I know that when I was little, I definitely looked up to the women I saw in these games, including Rebecca. She was always one of my favorites, and she still is. But I do have a few issues with the way Rebecca is written that I'd also like to discuss. For starters, I feel like her character is kinda one-dimensional in a lot of ways, at least in the games that I've discussed in this video. She's clearly very empathetic towards others and inexperienced and so lacks a little bit of confidence. I could definitely appreciate that Rebecca is capable of seeing conflicts in more than just black and white and can make important decisions on her own even when they defy orders because it's what she feels is the right thing to do. I like that she has that autonomy to make those decisions. And she doesn't just blindly do whatever people tell her to do. That's awesome. But other than that, Rebecca kind of falls victim to something that was a very common downfall of many strong female characters in 2000s media. The one-dimensional girl power character personality. I'll explain what I mean, don't worry. So, basically, in the early 2000s, a form of feminism that I like to call girl power feminism was extremely popular in basically all forms of media. Usually it would include a strong female lead or group of strong female leads that would be thrown into action-packed situations and defy the odds by proving that girls can do anything that guys can do. Examples of this can be found in things like the Charlie's Angels reboot movies, Totally Spies, or one particularly good example of this is the 2006 Amanda Bynes movie, She's the Man. In this type of media, the female lead or leads set out to do things that would be considered stereotypically masculine, like fighting bad guys, or in the case of She's the Man, prove that girls should be allowed to play on the boys' soccer team and that the team shouldn't be separated by gender because girls can play soccer just as well as boys can. That's like the whole premise of the movie. Oh, and she also dresses up as her brother for most of it. That part doesn't matter. That's all well and good, and I am absolutely not saying that this is a bad thing or that this type of media is bad, because I love all of the movies and shows that I just mentioned, especially She's the Man. It's one of my favorite movies. But where movies, shows, and games that fall into this category go wrong is by having these strong female leads slowly soften over time into something more manageable. This usually happens when the strong female lead encounters a male character that has the average early 2000s bad boy who's not a bad boy and is secretly very emotional and sweet kind of personality, and then their strong determination and stubbornness fades away as they warm up to them. It happens every single time. I don't know why. Basically, they're strong and independent until the love interest is introduced and they begin falling for them, and there is always a love interest, no matter what. I mean, in Resident Evil 0, Rebecca goes from, I don't need your help, I can handle this on my own, and don't call me little girl, to fully cooperating and warming up to Billy in less than 10 minutes of game time, which is made even worse by the fact that right before she leaves, Billy says, why don't you go and try while I wait here, which obviously means that he thinks that she's going to come crawling back to him, and not even 5 minutes later, he has to run in and save her, and she gives in and decides to cooperate with him. Rebecca's independent girl boss era lasted like a total of 20 minutes of gameplay. This is also something that kind of happens in Resident Evil Code Veronica, but we'll save that for another video. I'm sure you can make the argument that Billy isn't meant to be a love interest to prove that I'm wrong about this, but I also think you'd have to be pretty naive to genuinely believe that. No guy is calling girls honey and saying things like, been fantasizing about me, have you? If their only intention is to be purely platonic friends with a girl. I'd like to make it clear that I am by no means saying that women are automatically less strong when they need help or are accompanied by a man, but I do think that having Billy clearly not think of Rebecca as his equal, at least not for like the whole beginning half of the game, kind of undermines her character. Even Rebecca seems unable to muster up the confidence to assert herself with him and doesn't even gain that confidence until he's by her side and they're cooperating rather than being at odds with each other. I do like them together though. I can appreciate the bond that they form with one another throughout the course of the game, and I've always found the cutscenes where she lies to protect him and the final cutscene where she takes his dog tag so he can live out the rest of his life as a free man to be extremely touching. And I like their dynamic of sort of bickering like they hate each other while still very clearly caring about one another despite the fact that they should technically be enemies. It's very rom-com-y, and I love that about it. In general, I think if you're looking for a gaslight gatekeep girl boss kind of character in the Resident Evil franchise, Rebecca probably isn't the girl you're looking for. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Rebecca is kind, caring, smart, immensely empathetic, and capable of holding her own and earning respect from the men in her unit despite being a young woman working in a very male-dominated profession. She has her flaws, like lacking confidence, experience, and sometimes letting her big heart get the best of her, but I don't think it detracts from her character at all or takes away from her ability to be a good, strong female lead. I think the only thing I'd really change is that I would have liked if Rebecca would have had a little more time to really show us what she's made of before she begins cooperating with Billy and sharing the spotlight with him. But other than that, I really like Rebecca as a character, and she's definitely one of my favorite female Resident Evil characters and always has been ever since I was a little kid. Resident Evil 0 has always been one of those RE titles that's kind of overlooked, unfortunately, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to make this video, to talk about it and maybe get more people interested in checking it out if they haven't already. Well, it's basically the goal for all of these videos, actually. Anywho, with that, we have reached the end of today's analysis of Rebecca Chambers. As always, thank you all for watching. I hope you all have a good day or night or whatever time it is wherever you are, and I will see you next time.